Dave, thank you for joining me here at this pre-event interview for Project Voice. We appreciate your time. We're very grateful that you're going to be a part of the event in Chattanooga. Can you please introduce yourself to folks that are watching this archive, or maybe they're tuned in watching live on Project Voice First FM? We'd love to just have you tell folks about what you do as the chief evangelist at Amazon Alexa.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on. A pleasure to be here. Dave Isbitski. I'm not big into titles, so chief evangelist, assistant to the regional manager, right? Which is an Office Space joke for those listening. It's basically, I've been fortunate in my career. I just grew up this kid that loved tech, and my personality is, the only thing I figured out a while ago, the only thing I'm really good at is just being a messenger, just figuring stuff out and speaking in the language of human beings, right? So not getting too devy, not getting too markety, just figuring out what's going on, how the pieces fit, and then helping people figure out what that means to them. And so I've had this career spanning across other tech companies. Did the same thing at Microsoft, and I joined Amazon in 2013, helped launch the App Store on, at the time it was Kindle tablets and then Fire tablets, and then did the Fire TV launch and Fire Phone, and it was just the right place when this little device came along, and I was like, what is this thing? It was not called Echo at the time. And so I've just been so fortunate to be a part of that since the beginning. And I'm a big, for those who know me, I'm a big proponent of community. I always feel like my job is just to empower other people so that they don't need me. Like I had a podcast in the beginning, and I was doing all these kind of interviews, and that's when I met Bradley, and I'm like, this is great. Like, I need to stop podcasting so that we can just have this entire community of folks, And so I've just been along for the ride. The job in the beginning was like whatever needed to be done. So in the beginning, it was like doing the first hackathons, and I started these like Ask Me Anythings and doing webinars and talks and whatever else needs to be done. And it's kind of morphed, obviously there's way more people than just me there now. People way smarter than me, doing all sorts of awesome things on the Alexa team. And so kind of where I've found that I fit best is obviously continuing to do podcasts, doing social media, like what's going on, but also really talking with brands, talking with businesses. You may see me go out and, doing things around auto, doing things around enterprises, and just figuring out what does this mean? Because it's bigger than just voice, right? It's really the idea. And you may have heard me say this before, is I look at voice as the HTML. It's the new HTML, meaning that, hey, it doesn't matter what we're going to just talk anything. We're going to talk to everything in our life. We talk to our pets today, right? We talk to our, you may have already talked to your cars. I know people have names for their cars, but now you can talk to your car and actually have a conversation on your own terms as a human being. And so that's kind of, I feel really fortunate. I have this job in a super cool community. And I get to play with all the new stuff and figure out what that means, and then help people understand it, and then go back to the folks at Amazon and say, hey, maybe we should be building these type of things.
When you look at the landscape of the whole voice industry, and it's really unique that you have the role you have, but you didn't come in 2 or 5 years into the game. Like, you were there with Alexa as things were first happening with the first Echo. I remember I ordered the very first Echo. I think it was, like October, November, 2014. Right.
Yeah. Me too, man. I didn't get mine till February.
Yeah. I didn't get mine till February. I got my I remember I got my
came with a remote too. Yeah.
And I remember thinking, this is the future. This is it. This is where things are going. But when you look at it today, the whole landscape of voice, how do you see the state of the industry today, as you both look at it up close and from a distance?
Yeah, it was super interesting for me because in the beginning, I was like, who do I even go talk to? Right. So it was like I was using the hashtag online IoT because it seemed like, hey, maybe this is an IoT device, right? That was kind of the buzzword back then. And I remember for me, I was on a keynote panel It may have been 2014, 2015. It was Bluetooth World. And I remember being on this panel and everybody's like, we need a unifying interface to get consumers to want to use our smart appliances in the home, right? Because nobody was opening the mobile apps.
Yeah.
And I felt like I knew something that other people didn't, which is very rare for me in life, right? And I was like, hey, how about just talking to these things, you know? And it was funny how all of a sudden the panel shifted and people were like, oh, we want to talk to the Amazon guy. And then I started, and you hear this from people, like they'll start with light bulbs and suddenly, you know, one light bulb. And then it's like, wow, flicking a light switch is kind of lame now. And suddenly the whole house is light bulbs, right? Now I've got things where I say, start Christmas and it's red, green, red, green, red, green, all down here where you can see in my studio, right? Like I have routines, play a little music. Because when we were talking before the podcast about how your surroundings can affect your mood, right?
Yeah.
And so just seeing that progression for customers and the progression of, oh, well, if I'm asking for weather and I'm asking for music, why can't I ask for other things? And I think that's where the industry kind of is now, which is super interesting, right? Is that if I went back 4 or 5 years, there was zero expectation that I didn't have to think that technology could figure me out as a human being.
That's
And
right.
if you've been like you were saying you've had an Echo since 2015, right? Your expectation is you don't talk to Alexa like you're talking to a search engine.
No.
Okay? And she should grow over time, as should all smart assistants, and understand you more and more. And so I would say, and that's where I spend a lot of my time, by the way, with brands is like, look, yes, you can look at this as another endpoint, a way to interact with your existing customer base. So it increases engagement instead of new customer acquisition, right? But it doesn't have to replicate what you have inside of all these other experiences that you've already put in front of them. So if you're a hospitality chain, you don't have to create something that books a room. You could become a friend that actually knows me, that can tell me, hey, Dave, you know, remember when you were in Berlin last year? I just wanted to tell you that there's blah, 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 blah happening, right? Like stuff like that, you know? And so people are starting to figure that out now, is that, hey, there's voice-driven interfaces, but then there's also AI and learning about me and understanding context and human beings. And so I would say that's where the state of the industry is figuring out, where do I pull my resources? How is this different, especially for big companies and brands? How's this different than social media? How's this different than mobile? How's this different from web? And what's been exciting for me is what's really shifted is there's kind of the immediate plan. When I talk to folks, there's the immediate plan, but there's also a 5-year plan. And that didn't exist before, right? It was like, it was kicking the tires. And now there's like, people get, because they've had these devices in their homes and they've seen how they've changed, right? Like we have Sam Jackson now. You can say Alexa,
Yeah.
and I do that. And it's funny because the tweet kind of went viral when I announced that. And people are like, why do we need a non-explicit version of Sam Jackson, right? And
Right.
I can honestly say I have the non-explicit version in my house because we have kids.
Right.
Right. But I do it all the time. You know, I'm like, ask Sam for the weather. And it's so funny hearing him actually say the name of my town.
Yeah.
Right. And that happens. And this is kind of the evolution where we are in the industry. I mean, some of the stuff, what's 2016, right? So it's 3 years ago.
Right.
2016, there was a breakthrough in what's called neural TTS. So the way that we used to actually create voice before, it was an actual person recorded in a very neutral tone. So there's a human being, neutral, you're like, all right, that's good enough. It doesn't sound too excited or too disappointed. It's just in the middle, right?
Yeah.
But now we have the ability through these neural networks and deep learning to actually reproduce both the way that we hear things. And there's like little hairs inside of our ear, that inner ear, that hear all this, is that it's the nuances of not just the pitch and the tone, but it's the prosody, right? Like I have a tendency, if I'm excited, to speak really, really fast. And in fact, we can, and based on customer feedback, you can now say, Alexa, speak slower or speak faster. I don't know if you know that. And so I'm always like, Alexa, speak faster. But you know, my parents are like, speak slower. And so we have the ability to do that now. And so like when I talk to brands, I'm like, hey, you can, instead of having one size fits all, which is basically what all the interfaces we've built over the past 30 years have been, right? A visual interface is I have to go to my parents and say, this is how a mouse. I remember teaching people how to do double click back in Windows 3.1 when I was in help desk, right? Like there was a training program for that. And it's like, hey, wait, I want to listen to a man's voice. Or my dad, he was at the doctor the other day, and the doctor's older than me. And my dad was like, he's kind of young for a doctor, right? He's older. My dad's older. And I'm like, so maybe he wants an older man's voice, right? And maybe my kids, they want a younger teen's voice.
Right.
Like you can do that. And so there's this kind of connection that we have as human beings. We've evolved to be able to communicate, and all the subtleties that we see in a human face is what's super important. And in fact, I mean, is under Rohit Prasad, our group of Alexa scientists, just the stuff that they're doing. Like we have the ability now where Alexa can, and this is just starting, where she can pick up on tone.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell my kids this all the time. I'm like, it's not what you said to dad, it's how you said it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what respect is, right? If you say it sarcastically to me, that's very different than being respectful.
Very different.
And so that's important for communication. We haven't had that before, right? So to understand, a customer is actually, I mean, look at the UK, and this is why I love British humor, wit and sarcasm, right? That's what it's all about. And so if you're just a machine hearing those words, you may take it literally, and that's not the genius of that type of interaction, right? And so that's really changing. In fact, today you can say, we're trying to open it up more so people understand. So you could say, Alexa, what did you just hear? So maybe you asked for music and it's not the song that you heard. She'll tell you. Or maybe you asked to do something and another light goes on or something weird happens. You could say, why did you do that? Right? Like me talking to my kids, why did you do that? And she'll say, oh, well, this is what I heard. And so then you can give feedback on that. And so it's opening up that kind of, neural networks to begin with are kind of a black box, right? Of just how all of those interesting interactions are happening, but really opening that up for customers. And so I find that's what's exciting. I also think where we are in the industry today is that never before, as far as and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but never before have we been able to meet customers, just human beings, where they are in the moment, every day on their own terms. Everything has been, hey, do you know how to use this latest tech? Hey, have you patched my latest version? And now it's like a human being. When you talk to Dave, you have Dave December 2019 in front of you, right? I'm completely patched and up to date, and I may hopefully change my opinions over time as I get new information and I learn and I grow as a human being, right? And so we're going to see that.
That's right.
And I think it's going to become an expectation. It's going to, using an app is going to see so outdated. It's like, when is this thing even patched? And we're going in the holidays now, right? So anybody who's got any kind of tech prowess is going to be patching so many phones and so many computers over the next couple of weeks, right? To get the latest functionality. That's not the case with where we're headed.
Right. Exactly. I think what you said about the fact that the devices, not only can you tell it to speed up or slow down, speed up for you and I, slow down for our parents.
Right.
And not only is it learning us better and better, but there's all these different things that we can do to pivot our experience, much like an entrepreneur, right? If you're an entrepreneur, you build software and you're like, oh, that didn't work, right? Let's make this change. Well, in a sense, Amazon's empowering every Alexa user to keep retooling their experience with Alexa by saying, okay, that wasn't what I asked for. What did you just hear me saying? And figuring out how to actually speak to the machine. What is, in terms of like final thoughts, as we wrap up this interview, what's kind of final thoughts if you have the voice tech industry's attention? What's the thing that you want to say to them? Maybe a call to action.
Oh gosh, there's so many things, but I have no soapbox to stand on. I mean, this is the thing I learned in 2014 is that there have been people working on this for 30 years. And just what I've learned in the past 5 or 6 years has been incredible, And so I never make any assumptions to know people's customer and what they're looking for, right? And so
Right.
But I would say, this is what I would say is, how do I say this without sounding like such an Amazonian, right? Because it is true. We do work from the customer backwards. And so I think the biggest part that we can do, one, is to let and help train. And that's kind of what I do in my role, is to just let human beings know what's the capabilities now. It's funny, in 2014, 2015, you know what my biggest thing was that I had to do in every conversation? Was to tell people what they can't do.
Right.
Because they would get an echo and they would get excited and then be like, I want to build this. And it's like, actually, the API can only do these things. Like everybody was so excited. They were ready for this to do everything, and I think that's, your typical hype curve is like that of any kind of new thing. And so it's interesting in that it really is a focus on that person. I'll give you an example. Is we just launched personalization for people creating Alexa experiences. So you probably know that Alexa learns your voice over time. And so she can tell the difference between me asking for top hits and my teenage daughter, right? But now let's say you and I were creating our own experience for our podcast or something like that, right? I can tap into that API so that when I ask for, show me episodes I might be interested in, it just knows it's me.
Yeah.
And that's immensely powerful, right? I mean, you think about what I mean, I remember doing personalization on websites in 96, right? It's like, this has always been the dream, but for that to happen automatically. The other thing that's really cool about Alexa is, if you so choose, we don't force this, but if you so choose to do Amazon Pay and log in, Amazon Pay, you can do login with Amazon on the web and mobile, but you're already logged in with Amazon on an Echo.
That's right.
And so I think about, I had so many jobs growing up as a teen. I mean, from McDonald's at 14 to I worked in a movie theater, and I remember, everybody used cash back then. So you pull out a $10 bill and I would give them an upsell to buy a bigger popcorn. And it was literally like, you know what, I guess I could eat some more popcorn. And it was just boom. It was like that in the moment. Even doing it on mobile or web, I mean, you got to hit that button, it's happening.
That's right.
But if you've got an interaction and you like, hey, you know what, because I know your voice, you've been listening to me for a year and it's the holidays. So you know what, it may be my premium, all the premium content I've ever launched. And this is just me making something off the top of my head, but I want to use an example. All the premium content I've released this year maybe cost you $20. I'm going to give it to you for $1 right now. Are you interested? Right? We have never been able to do that other than a person-to-person interaction. And so that's what I try and remind people of, is it's the daily. One of the things that I do talk about in a lot of my keynotes nowadays is that we are seeing daily routines for Amazon Alexa customers. So you do see a spike in the morning as flash briefings come on. I do a word of the day. It's how I try and increase my vocabulary, right? And then I have tech news, and then we see another spike during lunch. Maybe you're taking lunch at your desk and you want some music, and then a spike in the commute home, and when kids are home from school, and maybe you're cooking dinner, and so there's timers being set and there's information being asked, and then kind of that evening routine. So looking at that, right, you look at mobile, it's like all over the place, right? It could happen. I forget what that statistics was. Like, some people are like checking their phones 100 times a day or some number like that, depending on if they have social media installed, right? And so being able to rely on and say, hey, you know what, if I know people are going to be listening to me in the morning, what's important in the morning, and what can I offer them every day? And it's important to remember that, right? And so in a nutshell, it's just human beings again. It's focusing on them. And to be fair, companies have never had that opportunity before. As a tech evangelist for decades, right, I would come in and say, hey, everything you've learned, that stuff's old news. I've got this new tech or in this new device, and I want you to go learn all this new stuff so that you can go talk to the same customer again, right?
That's right.
And that's kind of been the cycle. And so that's going away now. And so it's really learning. I have this title. I don't know if people thought it was as cool as I did, but I have this title. It's called Learning to Talk to Your Customer Again in a Voice First World. And that's kind of how I look at it, right? Is it's removing those barriers. So that's what I would remind folks about.
Well, I really have enjoyed the conversation with you. I feel like you articulate the humanity of people interacting with tech by voice in a way that I'd like to hear more people articulate. So I think you're really serving the industry. Like, you gave me a bunch of phrases today that I did not previously have to try to explain the importance that people remember that they're a person, they're
Right.
dealing with technology, but that there's some total stark differences, but also some similarities in terms of how you communicate, and that we never, as an individual or as a community, ever imagined that we would be able to talk to zeros and ones. Like,
Right.
that was never on our radar. I mean, we'd see it in Minority Report 20 years ago. Tom Cruise walks in, he talks to his house, but it wasn't something that people absorbed, like, oh yeah, that's going to happen in my life. I'm going to talk to my light switch. I'm going to talk to my oven. I'm going to talk to my shower and my blinds. It's
Yep.
just, and we're only getting started in terms
Oh
of,
yeah.
so well,
And it's,
we're,
and it's one of the things I learned early on, even in just human interaction, and I think we've kind of lost it in this age of shouting over each other, right? Is behind every question is a questioner.
yeah,
There's a human being there, and not everybody articulates things well,
no,
and not everybody even knows the question that they want to get to yet. And so that's what's important to remember, because it's going to be the same when we're interacting with everything in our life,
that's right.
whether it's tech or human beings.
That's right. Well, Dave, thanks for joining me for the pre-event interview for Project Voice. We're looking forward to having Amazon Alexa represented, and we're grateful for the sponsorship. And I know a lot of people are coming to this event specifically to be able to learn from the folks that are either at Amazon Alexa or have been building great tech in partnership with Alexa. And so for me, as somebody in this industry, I am grateful to you and your team for all that you do to promote the voice first approach to things. So thank you for that. And I look forward to seeing you at the event, January 13th through the 17th. It's happening in Chattanooga, Tennessee, Project Voice.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.